Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dialogue Over Division. And today we have with us a lawyer in Alberta. His name is James Kitchen, and I'll let him introduce himself so we get it all right.
Well, thank you, Eva. I don't think everybody's given me that opportunity before, so it's interesting. I'm a lawyer. I call myself a civil liberties or civil rights lawyer, and I love to litigate and I love defending people's rights. I'm very passionate about it. Anybody who knows me knows that. I get pretty excited about it because I care about people, and I think if you care about people, you need to care about their rights. And so I have my own private practice, and I get to decide what cases I take, which is one of the reasons why I do. And I take the most controversial cases I can, usually because they're the ones that nobody else will take, and they usually involve freedom of religion and free speech. And I love to fight for those underdog people that can't get their rights defended by anybody else. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to do what I do, and I love doing it. And I love hearing that at least some people are grateful for it and appreciate it.
Yeah, and I really want to get into that. So I want to hear all about some of the cases you're taking on. And so you know, too, I'd like to do a little bit of a Charter 101 so that Canadians really have an understanding of what the Charter is and what you've seen with your clients and what you've seen online where people are just not really getting it. So I'm hoping to get through that today. But maybe we could start. I love to hear your story too. That's very much where I come from. It's like I feel like I want to help those more vulnerable and fight the underdog fight against, the government, or it used to be big oil and gas companies. And I just find that incredibly rewarding. So maybe let's talk about some of the cases that you have ongoing right now and what you've seen going on.
Sure.
And yeah, anyway, I'll get to that later.
Okay, so anybody who knows, I mean, even a little bit about me would probably know I used to work at the Justice Center. That's where I started my career as a constitutional lawyer. It's a great place to get my feet wet. I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then I felt like, okay, I want my own practice because I want to be able to take whatever cases I want, and I'll be candid. I want to make a little bit more money. I can make some decent money, but I can also provide my services, at a more affordable rate than what a lot of people can get. Right? There's these big retainers. I don't do retainers. There's the hourly rate is sometimes $500 an hour, especially if in Ontario. My Ontario clients appreciate my rate a little more. Um, and so, I'm able to fill this niche where there's are people who do have money, they can pay, they can't find a lawyer, they can't go to the Justice Center because they have a specific mandate, and they're trying to find somebody who's going to fight for my rights that I can actually pay and want to pay, that actually is like-minded and is going to make me feel like crap for not taking the shot or something like that. Um, and that's the service I provide. That's the niche I fill. I love it. My clients love it, and it's great. I get to take whatever case I want. I don't worry about what my clients think because they all believe in free speech. I don't worry about what the media thinks. I don't worry about what the government thinks. I don't worry about what some. I don't care. I generally don't worry about what the law society thinks. Obviously, that I can't just be an idiot and spew all kinds of stupid stuff. It gets me into trouble. But I do say very controversial stuff. I will challenge things I feel unjust, even if that means there might be a law society complaint. I'm willing to take that risk. I think it's the right thing to do. So I'm a bit of a maverick out there doing what I think, and I run by my own moral conscience, which I do think is decent. It is informed by the fact that I'm a Christian. I'm a biblical Christian, and I'm informed by what I think God wants me to do and what He thinks is right. So that's how I run personally and professionally, and that's how I run my cases. And so that, of course, that leads me to I did a lot of COVID stuff. I'm still doing a lot of COVID stuff. I have a lot of human rights and employment case law or cases that I'm doing. Um, and recently doing a lot of transgender stuff. So this is, people, whether religious or not, they're usually Christians, not always. Sometimes they're Muslims or Jews or not at all. They say, look, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. You can't switch. Men shouldn't be in women's bathrooms. Men shouldn't be in women's sports. I'm not going to use a different pronoun, whatever, right? Whatever it is. I do a lot of that work because I think that's really important, and there's nobody else that's doing it, and that's willing to do it or is competent to do it, and I am. So I have some private cases in there I can't talk about, but I obviously have one famous public case about that, and that's of course the Josh Alexander. Now, and I'm gonna tell you this. I'm not gonna tell you the outcome of the decision because it's not fair to the people who fund this case. But I got the decision on the Josh Alexander case in my email this morning.
Oh,
So people can watch. I won't say what the outcome is. I'll just say it's what most people were expecting. It's what I
Well,
was expecting.
well, let's take it back a little bit. Why don't you take us through the case?
Sure.
Because one thing I wanted to talk to you about and have a bit of a conversation about is what makes sense to bring to a lawyer, because that's what I've seen an issue in Canada is people are up in arms and they're like, why isn't a lawyer taking this? I want a lawyer fighting for my rights. And some of the time it's not an appropriate thing to take to a lawyer, or you can, but taking it to a lawyer, which we've talked about in other spaces, is incredibly long and expensive. So there's other routes like engaging with your elected officials. So tell me a little bit more about what happened, because I actually don't know the full story with Josh Alexander. I've seen bits and pieces here and there. So why don't we hear it start to finish, and then maybe you could give us a little bit of a bit of what that decision has to say.
Sure. Okay. So Josh Alexander was, so we're going back about exactly a year ago. Okay.
Mm.
So in the fall semester of 2022, he was a grade 11 high school student at a Catholic high school. Now, this is a Catholic public high school. So most people would know Canada's a little bit unique. It's got this public, what used to be Protestant, but is now overtly secular education system. Okay. And then you have this parallel system. Okay. It's public. It's fully public. It's just like the secular one, except for the fact that it's Catholic. And it's actually constitutionally permitted to be Catholic. So that doesn't just mean, this, it means actually the beliefs, which of course, we all know what Catholic, I shouldn't say we all know. A lot of people understand Catholic beliefs are very, very different than our modern sensibilities about sex and gender, for example, marriage, abortion, pro-life, whatever, right? They have a lot of beliefs that have been the same over thousands of years, but have become, because of the changing in culture, very unpopular, okay? So, but most public Catholic schools are actually no different than the secular schools. Okay, they're run the same. There's a cross outside, and the school board trustees do the cross when they have their school board meetings. But functionally, they're the same. They're no different, right? The boys are allowed to take their penises into the girls' washrooms in the Catholic schools, just like they are in the secular schools, right?
So they can? That's already
Yeah,
allowed?
yes. So now I'm sure there are a few rural Catholic schools that aren't allowing that in this country, probably particularly in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I'm sure there are a few, but the vast majority of them, they're indistinguishable from public schools. Okay, they're not run any different. Well, an excellent example of that is Monique Lagrange, right? She is a Catholic. She espouses Catholic beliefs, right? She would agree with Josh Alexander that penises don't belong in girls' washrooms in the Catholic schools. Okay, she would acknowledge the fact that the Catholic doctrine says that homosexuality is a sin. Don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it, but that is what it says, right? And for that, she was kicked off the school board, right? By the other supposedly Catholic school board trustees who aren't actually Catholic. They're just normal secular people who maybe go to Catholic church on Sunday morning. I don't know, but they kicked her off for being too Catholic, right? That gives you an idea of what Catholic school boards are like all across the country. That's just the way it is.
Yeah,
So
and I just wanted to give some context with Monique Lagrange. So she's was in Red Deer, I believe. She's a school trustee, was that right, for the Catholic school board? And she had brought, what was the controversy that you said that she raised?
So
Well,
she
not
she
even a
she
controversy,
had
but
shared a meme on her Facebook that said brainwashing is brainwashing. That was the text. She didn't write that. That was somebody else. Somebody else who created this meme. But the pictures in the meme were of about half a dozen school-age children, maybe 10, 11, 12. They were in a train. It was a black and white photo. They were smiling and they were waving Nazi flags. Okay, so it was clearly a picture of German children during the 30s or 40s. Okay,
Mhm.
underneath it was a picture of, again, about half a dozen or so school-age children, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, waving the Pride Progress flags. Okay, so these two pictures that are right beside each other, and it's saying brainwashing is brainwashing, which we
Got
all
it.
understand what that means. Like those kids were brainwashed into Nazi ideology. These kids are brainwashed into the Pride Progress ideology.
Yeah.
Okay, so she posted that. Okay, now your average typical Bible believing Catholic would say, "Yep." Now they might not say it publicly; they might be too scared to, and I don't blame them. And that's obviously a reflection on how intolerant our society is. But they would believe that. Okay, the people who voted for Monique LaGrange would believe that. And it's not like, I mean, I know that that makes people angry and upset and emotionally disturbed, and I get all that. But, it's a valid opinion, and it should be permitted to be shared in a society that actually values freedom of religion and free speech, okay? And you should be able to share it, yes, as an elected Catholic school board trustee. If the people don't like it, they can decide not to elect you next time. I'm sure if there was some woke school board trustee who ran against Monique, they would obviously dig that up and use it against her. Hello,
Mhm.
democracy, right? But the school board said, no, 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 no. That made a few LGBT people really upset, and we're not going to allow that, and so we're going to kick you off the board, right? No, it's not how it's supposed to work. I'm sorry. In a free and democratic and equal society that's actually worth living in, we allow free speech even to the point that it makes some people upset. That's the price we pay. That price is worth paying.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry. That's the Monique LaGrange case. You now know that case. So let's go to the Josh Alexander case. So he was just a guy going to this Catholic school. Okay. Now he is a Protestant Christian, and he has strong biblical beliefs about gender and sexuality. But they are not different than the canonical Catholic beliefs, and that's important to understand. So he finds out that the boys are going in the girls' washrooms, and one of the girls comes to him and says, "I don't like this, and it makes me uncomfortable." And of course, we're scared to talk about it, and we know the principal won't listen to us, and we don't know what to do. And he says, "Well, I'm a young man, and it's my job to stand up for this stuff, so I'm going to say something about it." So he starts talking about it. Now, if you follow Josh Alexander at all, one thing you'll see about him is he's extraordinary insofar as he can keep his cool and stay calm and not shoot his mouth off or react physically or whatever. He's had people physically assault him, throw stuff on him. He had some black woman in Calgary stick her hand down his pants. He's had people, punch him and push him, and somebody beat his brother over the head with something, made him bleed all over the place. All these people have called him all these terrible names: transphobe, racist, homophobe, whatever, every phobe and ist in the book. And he doesn't react with anger or swearing or name calling or getting physically aggressive. He doesn't react at all that way. Now, we expect that of people, as we should. We expect it of adults, but he's a 17-year-old. Okay, he was 16, and he's always maintained that. Okay, the reason I'm saying that is because the allegations against him are bullying. That's the allegations, that he's a bully
Mm.
at this school, right? But if you
And
watch
that's
him,
he was kicked out too, right? Out of his school.
so what happened is he was
I'm
accused of
jumping
bullying.
ahead.
Yeah, so he went around saying, look, boys are boys, girls are girls. You can't switch from one to the other, and the boys shouldn't be going into the girls' washrooms. I'm sorry, but that shouldn't be controversial. That's just true. And if you feel otherwise, I get that. I respect your right to feel that way, and even to act on it, up to the point where you're not going into the girls' washroom, or you're not demanding me to call you something you aren't. I got no issue with that. I got no hatred. I got no dislike. You can be and believe whatever you want, but we just, you got to recognize that the boys can't go into the girls' washrooms, and that boys are actually boys and they're not girls just because they say so. And no, if I'm not going to call you a girl if you are a boy. That's just, I mean, that's me participating in a lie. I'm not going to do that stuff. Okay, but he wasn't a bully about it. Now, the problem is, of course, the definition of bullying has changed to be if you say something I disagree with, you're a bully. That's the whole problem, right? So he says this stuff. He advocates for the girls. He sets up a rally outside the school for people to be able to peacefully protest against the fact that the boys are going in the girls' washroom. And 2 days before that rally starts, the school board, the principal suspends him. Doesn't expel him, but gives him a suspension. So he's not allowed at school. It's as if he's done something wrong, right? It's, we know how this works. You get the schools where the guy brings the brass knuckles to school and he's suspended, right? That's the typical story. That's what they did to him,
And
right?
it was based on the bullying premise that he was suspended.
Yeah, yeah. What's funny is that all the stuff that led to the bullying allegation was actually from a month before. The principal had been dealing with it. He didn't take a really crazy approach to it at first. He was just kind of working with Josh. But what happened, and this is predictable, of course, the main transgender kid in the school, who's gone back and forth and was actually a furry. He was actually a furry for a little while, which I think is the whole. You think you're an animal and you're doing the litter box thing, and I've just learned about this in the last couple of months. So that he was. I'm not sure if it was a boy or girl actually, but that student was the main transgender kid at the school, and that kid's parents got involved, right? And I think that child's mother is some sort of LGBT activist in the local community, and so they got involved, and they got very angry and upset, and they pressured the principal and all this, and that's typically how it goes, right? You get these super political activists who come in with this, and so when this rally was going to happen, obviously that's a lot of bad press for the school. That's a lot of exposure. The trans activists are very, very mad about that. So what does the principal do, right? He feels like he's got to do something. So even though he had been dealing with this appropriately, he hadn't punished Josh. He'd just been talking to him about it, telling him to be respectful, which he was. Boom, we get a suspension 2 days before the rally. And the kids in the school were all threatened with having their school bus that day taken away from them if they attended the rally. So the school was taking this very like micro tyrannical approach to this and trying to lock down its students and saying you can't express this and we're going to kick out the ringleader and you can't go to the rally and nobody should oppose the bathroom policy with boys in the girls' washrooms. And so one thing led to another. He went back. Obviously, him and I talked about that. He's like, "Well, this is unlawful. It's religious discrimination." So I'm going to go back. And so he went back and he got arrested. And then he went back again. And the school was mad and didn't know what to do with him because they just thought he'd be a good little boy and complied with their unlawful orders, and he didn't. And that's really where the case got really famous. Of course, I was involved right from the beginning, way back he hired me on December 22nd of last year after he got suspended. And so when that happened, so he got multiple suspensions. Then he got an exclusion, okay, which means he physically can't be at the school. He's academically participating, but he physically can't be there. And of course, the whole premise is the bullying, okay, the whole way along. We're supposed to have an appeal with the school board trustees, but the school board, of course, didn't want that to happen, okay? So they said, well, you either have to do it through your parents or not at all. You can't do it on your own. The law says you can do it on your own if you're over 16. You can hire a lawyer and you can do it on your own. Okay, that's what he did. He's obviously a mature individual, okay? He runs his own life, okay? He lives with his parents. He loves his parents. At the time he did, but he runs his own life. He hired me. His parents were not involved in that at all. They said, look, do it through your parents or not at all. Here's why they wanted to do it through his parents. His parents work at the very woke, militantly woke public school board in the same region. Okay, this is Renfrew County. Renfrew County has got its Catholic, it's got its public school board. Those two people, his parents, work as public teachers, public school board teachers in the public school board, right? We all know what's going to happen to them if they get affiliated too much with Josh. They're going to get turfed, okay? And I'll let people figure out what actually happened because I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I'll just say this. We weren't crazy in predicting that. School board knows that, right? So they make us go to court. We have to go to court in Ontario in order to get a declaration that he is able to do this appeal on his own through me, even though that's literally what the school board's policies say. I have to go to court and spend thousands of dollars, and we have to argue that before the court, okay? And then the court takes like 3 or 4 months to give me a decision on it. Now, thankfully, in a rare example of the law actually being followed by the courts in Canada on controversial political cases, the judge ruled in our favor and said, yes, of course he can bring this case. That's what your policies say. He's over 16. He's hired a lawyer. Let him bring the appeals. So we finally had the appeals heard in November, okay, just about a month and a half ago, okay, when they should have been heard like last April or May. Okay, because the school board was able to do their delay and able to bleed us with some money, and I got some of that back in costs, so that was good. So that's what led to us having this appeal before 3 Catholic school board trustees in November. Okay, now obviously I didn't expect to win. Okay, and let me just say this: I'm not. I predicted right. We didn't win. So people are going to hear more about that. I'm going to announce that. I literally just got the decision today. I haven't read it all, but I can tell you we didn't win, and that's exactly what I expected. And I even predicted that they'd want to get the decision out just before Christmas, so it would hopefully get buried in the media. And here we are. These people are very predictable.
So this brings up a great point, and something I want to talk about is there's a mechanism through the school board to appeal a decision, and you talked about that. And there were 3 Catholic school board trustees that were going to listen to it. So you don't have a judge listening to this. And that, I just want to make this clear. This, for people watching, this is more an administrative route. One example you could use is Workers' Compensation Board. That's one that generally people are more familiar with. So it's a board that's it's specific to workers' compensation issues. So you were injured at your workplace and you go before this board because they're specialized. Courts, judges aren't specialized in a certain area except for the law. So what happened in this case, and again, I'm just learning all about it, is that they said that our rules are not going to allow Josh and James to come and argue it. You have to go, and they had to go to court to make sure that the rules that they have are being followed. And so there was kind of a mix of this administrative and court system. So that's why things take longer sometimes. That's why things aren't clear cut, unfortunately. We saw a little bit about that with Dr. Peterson's. His professional body was telling him he had to have this disciplinary action. And he actually tried to get out of it by saying, I don't think you have the right to do this. So he went to court first. And then the court said, no, no, your professional body can do this. That's what they're about. And so lots of people didn't understand that distinction as well. So the reason that you have these administrative bodies, these professional bodies, is because they're supposed to be more knowledgeable about the area, more about their own rules. But what we've seen in Canada for this last while is they kind of are making things up as they go along. And like you used already with the school being quite tyrannical. And that's been a problem for lawyers. And just because you're going through this story, I think it's a great point to identify to Canadians that that's a great place to get involved on a grassroots level, is because that's an opportunity, a massive opportunity, less costly opportunity to affect change in these professional bodies or these administrative school bodies and things like that. So if you have any comments about that.
I do. I've been saying that for years. I've been saying, look, you want to do something, and you're not this, polished person with hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. So you probably can't run to be as an MLA or MP or whatever. I get that. Okay, you're a regular Joe, but regular Joes can run for the school board. Okay, and they can get elected, and they can work together, and they can affect enormous positive change. Right? Monique Lagrange is a normal woman. She's married to a farmer, I think. She's a normal person, and she just ran and she just got elected. Okay, and she's been able to do all kinds of good things. Okay, and she's continuing to do good things because she's taking court action through me against this decision to kick her off. Right. So at the school board level, okay, that's where we're seeing so much harm to children, so much tyranny, so much violations of parental rights and religious rights, etc. You can get elected onto the school board and you can fix that. Okay, you can go in, you can change the policies. You can fire the woke lawyers that the school boards use. You can fire the woke superintendents that are doing all this tyranny. You can do that. Okay, it'll be tough. Don't get me wrong. Don't think it'll be easy. You'll have all kinds of pushback. Okay, but you can go in and you can do that. Okay, and the only way that can be overridden is if the education minister comes in and decides to remove you, which is very unlikely, and that's a political move. And if they're a decent MLA, that's not going to happen. Yes, I wish people would do that more and more and more. I spoke to the Lloydminster crowd up in Alberta about this years ago, before the last election, and they took it to heart and they ran. And they, out of 9, they got 4 of their people in there. They didn't quite get 5, but they made a good run. They tried, and they're going to keep going. And that's how you do it, right? Because the lawyers can come in and we can do our thing, but we are pretty limited in what we can do, okay? It takes a ton of money. It takes a very long time. You got all these woke decision makers that are not likely to agree with us. You guys can go in and in the next election, you can get elected and you can do way more than us lawyers can. And man, I wish people would get that message, because I constantly get what can we do? It's so awful. Everything's terrible. What can we little people do? That's one huge thing. That's not the only thing, but that's a huge thing right there. Run for the school board.
And to add to that, if you look at the voter turnout rates federally versus provincially versus municipally, it's always the highest at the federal level, and it goes down provincially generally, and then municipally it goes down. And we expend so much time and energy on what Justin Trudeau is doing 4,000 kilometers away, and we don't focus on what's going on in our backyard. And I think that, you don't have to be polished or anything like that, but that's not even the point too. You can be polished, but you need to clean up your own backyard first before you want to affect change in Ottawa. And there you do have a little bit more, you have set in political parties that have been around for a while, whereas with the school board trustees, these people are coming and going. They're not politically affiliated generally. Sometimes we know that is happening. So I think that's such a great point. So I'm glad you brought that up too. So, really interesting with the Josh Alexander case, and I guess we'll hear where it goes. Has he graduated now, or what is his like educational status?
So they kicked him out of all of grade 11, and then they also kicked him out of grade 12. So he's never been able to go back to the school because he won't change his beliefs. That's what they've asked. They've said, look, change your beliefs, you can come back. And he said no. And he said, well, then as far as we're concerned, you're a bully and you're not allowed to be at the school.
So he
So
couldn't even take classes outside of school. They
he could.
prevented him from an
He could.
education.
He could
Okay,
take classes online or at a separate location, at a segregated location. Now,
but he chose not to.
well, he chose not to. He
Got
said,
it.
look, I'm not going to tacitly condone the violation of my rights by participating in this. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful. I mean, that's a huge sacrifice for him to take. I do think it's the right thing to do. Okay. That's the real way to call people on their crap. And I'm glad he did it. But yeah, no. So I want people to understand, yes, he could have done that, but that's just enabling the tyranny. I don't think that's right, and I'm really glad that he did it that way.
So, just out of curiosity, did this school or did Josh ever do like a survey or anything to see how many people didn't agree with this bathroom policy? Did it ever go to that, or was it just one day this decision comes up? Like, to be completely frank, I find that, for kids, it's shocking that this is what schools are doing. I had no idea.
The school's tact is to say this is what the Ontario Human Rights Code requires.
Right.
That's their argument. Now they're wrong, I think, but that's their approach. So they don't care about surveys or any of that. Now, here's the thing. Here's what's probably going on. The woke, apparently not Catholic people that actually run these school boards, this is what they want because they politically agree with it and support it. They want boys to go into the girls' washrooms because they fully support the transgender narrative. Okay, they're part of the ideology. They use the Ontario Human Rights Code as a scapegoat. Okay, because here's the thing: you can't go as supposedly Catholic people and try to convince a whole bunch of actual real Catholics that this is a good idea. To like persuasive, you can't persuade them. You can't convince them. You can't get them to voluntarily support that. Right? They're going to say, well, this is not what we want. Hear our opinion. This is not what we want, going to your question. So what they've done is they've just used the code as a scapegoat. Well, of course, 90% of those, normal Catholics are going, oh, well, I guess if it's the law, stupid law, bad law, angry law. And notice where now their anger is directed towards this law that they can't change. That it doesn't even say what they've been told it says. Instead of at the school board where it should be. That's
Yeah.
my take. I have no evidence for that. That's my personal take on what I think is really, really, really going on. And the reason I say this, I want people to know that if you happen to be a Catholic listening to this, if your Catholic school board tells you, well, this is what the law requires, no, you need to challenge them on that. Say, I don't think it does actually. And the reason I say this is because as a Catholic, you might actually know this if you send your kids to school. The Constitution, which although it doesn't mean much anymore, it means something still. The Constitution says you are allowed to be a Catholic school board. Well, the human rights laws are subject to the Constitution. The Constitution, imagine a priority of law, okay? Constitution, Human Rights Act, everything else. The Constitution's above the Human Rights Act. The Human Rights Act says put penises in the girls' washroom, and the Constitution says you're allowed to be Catholic, which means you can keep penises out of the girls' washrooms. Then when the Catholic school board says that they have to because of the human rights law, they're wrong. They're either lying to you or they're just mistaken. In either case, you should challenge it and push back on it because it's not the case. What that means is that they're actually just trying to hide that they want this politically, but they don't want to admit that to you, so they're using the Human Rights Code as a scapegoat.
Well, let's break that down. So, what is it in the Human Rights Act that they're saying says penises could go into the women's bathroom? What?
All the human rights codes in the country now protect gender identity and gender expression.
Okay.
So if you express or identify as a girl, even though you're an intact man, at any age, doesn't matter what the age is. At least that's where we're at now. That's what the belief system and the ideology behind these things. It says at any age, if you identify as a sex different than what you are, that permits you to enter the other sex's spaces. So sports teams, bathrooms, change rooms, beauty pageants, swimming lessons, whatever it is, right? I mean, there's probably aware of the example of the 50-year-old man that goes in with the swims with the teenage girls somewhere out east. I think one of those crazy rebel guys was covering that. That's what this ideology says, and that's what the human rights commissions will say these rights protect, right? So there's the right on paper, and then what does it actually protect. That's what some of them would say. Now, the commissions are pretty clear that as adults, this really is the case. So yes, men are allowed to take their penises into the girls' washrooms at the local bar or at the local mall or whatever. Okay, and the commissions are pretty strong on that. And I think if you challenge that as a woman, unfortunately, you're probably going to lose with the woke commissions. Where the commission is a whole lot less clear, okay, is in the case of kids, as it should be. I mean, no matter how much you go in for all this, boys should identify as girls, you got to be able to recognize that these girls are young girls. They're vulnerable. They they are not attending school voluntarily most of the time. They're required to by law. They're required to by their parents. So there's already some coercion there. Not bad coercion, but but so they're already required to go to school. They're required to enter that bathroom in order to pee. Okay,
Hmm.
or that change room, that's a whole lot worse, right? If it's gym class, which sometimes it's a mandatory part of the curriculum, they're required to get changed for gym class. Okay, they have to enter that space. Okay, they're they're teenagers, they're young. It used to be that 5 or 10 years ago we had this big thing about the Me Too movement. I don't know what happened to that. The trans thing came in and took that over, where we were all concerned about girls and women being sexually assaulted by men. If we're so concerned about that, which we should be, by the way, I have a daughter and a wife, and I'm pretty bloody concerned about that. Then why are we not concerned about biological males? I don't care what they identify as. They have muscles that are stronger than girls. They have a penis that works. Why are we saying it's okay for these boys to go in there? Okay, they have to be really, really, really naive and stupid to think, well, no big deal because they identify as a girl. So of course they're not going to sexually assault the other girls. That's a load of baloney. Okay, so that's that's the kid context. That's the under 18 teenager context. Okay, so the commissions are a lot less strong on that. Okay, and that's even before we get to, again, it doesn't matter what the commission says. The Constitution says, which again, it's supposed to mean something. It doesn't really anymore, but it's supposed to. Okay, it says you have a constitutional entrenched right that we put in there in 1867 to be Catholic. So if as a Catholic school you decide that it is against Catholic beliefs to allow boys in girls' washrooms, it doesn't matter what the Ontario Human Rights Commission says, you're allowed to do that because the Constitution says you're allowed to do that. As long as you can connect it to your beliefs, which clearly you can. That's not complicated. The Bible's pretty clear about that. Catholic doctrine's pretty clear about that. So that's just, I mean, I know that's a lot right there to unpack, but that's the analysis I would give is one, the human rights law doesn't say that underage girls should have to be subjected to penises in their private spaces. And two, even if it does, which it doesn't, the Catholic School Board has the legal right to say no. So both of those things are at play, and they're being ignored by all these woke Catholic school boards who are saying no problem, and if you challenge that, we're going to kick you out.
So has it been challenged on a constitutional basis for kids?
Not that this is still pretty new. Like this is only like in the last 5 years, and of course in the law that's pretty short period of time.
Hmm.
Um, no, it hasn't. I think what Catholic school board would be willing to go through all the public scorn, and spend all that money and go through all that effort, to go through with that. Um, so that's one. Two, I don't think they've had to. I don't think there's been a case where a Catholic school board has actually said no to this. Okay,
Hmm.
here's the scenario. So you get your rural Alberta Catholic school board. Okay, it's actually Catholic. Okay, it's one of the few left, and you get the local radical activist who sends their boy to the school, and then that boy identifies as a girl, and then that boy who identifies as a girl says, "I want to go into the girls' change room, bathroom," and the school says, "No, you can't. It's against our Catholic beliefs." And then that boy launches a complaint to the Alberta Human Rights Commission on the basis of gender identity, gender expression, and then the commission rules against the school and commands the school to allow that boy to enter the girls' space. That case hasn't yet happened that I'm aware of, and I'd be one of the first to probably be aware. In fact, I'd probably be one of the ones to be the lawyer on that case. So to me, to my knowledge, that case hasn't happened yet.
But
Okay.
what about the vice versa one on these issues that already, where the commission is already making these decisions, saying that this is okay, and it hasn't been challenged by anyone on a constitutional basis then?
Not that I'm aware of. Do you mean outside of the Catholic context?
No, in the Catholic context, but with the opposite of what you were suggesting, not where they took a stance that no, you can't, but where they are taking the stance that yes, you can.
Oh, that's interesting. I suppose the Catholic parents could go to
Have-
could sue the school board.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm not aware. Well, hey, that could be happening. That could be
just
happening
an
somewhere.
idea to throw out
Yeah,
there
it's an idea. Just an idea. I'm not aware of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some Catholic
at
parents who are
some
considering
point.
that.
Yeah.
That's something to look into. Absolutely.
Well, this is something we were talking about on a space too, is while I already started saying that, it's not the best idea to take things to court and hire lawyers because it's expensive and it's very long, but there are certain things that need to go through the court system so that we get clarity on it. And this sounds like a place where it would be really helpful to get that clarity from a constitutional basis, like you're saying, that overrides the commission. And somebody needs to make a decision finally for everyone whether or not the Ontario or the human rights commissions have gone a little bit sideways here with their determinations.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. That would be good, and I'd love to be involved in that case. And I wish it didn't have to be so difficult and onerous and expensive and long. That's one of my criticisms of the Canadian justice system. Is as I went through law school. I mean, I'm not that old. I graduated law school in 2016, and I was fed all this hooey about access to justice. And I remember when I was in law school. I mean, definitely now I'm like that was hogwash. But even when I was in law school, I was like, this is just a bunch of feel good nonsense, right? Like, take one example. Your EI, okay? You're an unvaccinated Christian, you get turfed from your job, you apply for EI, and you're unlawfully denied your EI benefits, okay? Then you have to ask for a reconsideration. Then that's denied. Then you have to go to the General Division of the Social Security Tribunal. That's denied. Then you have to go to the Appeal Division of the Social Security Tribunal. That's denied. Then you have to go for judicial review to the Federal Court of Canada. That's denied. Then you have to appeal to the Federal Court of Appeal. That's denied. Then you have to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, who won't accept your appeal. That's denied. How many levels of court did I just list off?
Too
Right?
many. Yeah.
How many tens of thousands of dollars is that to pay somebody who charges reasonable and knows what they're doing and is going to pull on precedents like me? That's tens of thousands of dollars worth of work for me. That's like 400 hours, well, let's say 300 hours worth of work for me to go through all those levels of court, right? That's not access to justice. Over an EI claim, right? And what's your EI claim worth? $10,000? You're clearly only going to fight that if you really care about principle and you're independently wealthy. Well, how many people are there like that in Canada? Not any more than one I could fit in my living room. I'm running two EI cases. One of them is crowdfunded through Liberty Coalition Canada, which is the only reason it's existing. And the other one is a person who has a little bit of money and a whole lot of principle. And they're, like I said, they're extraordinarily rare. So as I run these cases, I'm like, where's the access to justice, right? These tribunals are supposed to be set up for self-reps to be able to get their benefits. Well, what happens? Their benefits are constantly denied because the whole system is corrupt, because everybody making a decision is making it based on their political biases and prejudices, right? Because they just want to get what they want, which is the COVID narrative. They don't care about these people and that they lost their EI that they paid into just because they didn't take an experimental medical injection, right? That's not access to justice, right? I come in and it's all this money and trouble to go through these judicial reviews, and I'm still waiting on my decision on the big one that I just went to the federal court. But the Justice Center, which is in at the Federal Court of Appeal on a case similar to mine, not exactly the same, fortunately, they didn't even want to hear from the other side, and they gave an oral judgment that day. They'd already made up their minds, right? I mean, all that effort, and the judge didn't even, the court didn't even properly consider the argument. So access to justice is a joke in this country, because if you're poor and you're on the what is it, the pyramid of the hierarchy of oppression or whatever, if you're black and you're gay and you're two-spirit and you're disabled and you're trans and you're all the rest of it, well, then you can get access to justice. But if you're just some, well, my client is actually, one of my clients is black. If you're a black Christian woman who didn't take the shot because of her religious beliefs, I mean, you don't get access to justice, right?
But how do you mean you get access to justice easier if you're black and gay and two-spirit? Which I don't know if you can be all of that at once. The gay and two-spirit, maybe.
I'll give you an example. So I file a complaint at the Human Rights Commission because it's a little bit cheaper than going to court, and it's a little bit less risky because my clients don't get any, they don't get any costs if they lose. Okay, so I take client A. She works at a nursing home. No, sorry, not a nursing home, a funeral home. Okay, and she can't take the shot because of her religious beliefs, and so she's turfed. Right? She earns like 40 grand a year. Okay. And so she just didn't have that much money. Her case isn't worth that much. She goes to the commission, okay, and then the commission summarily dismisses her case, right? And the decision is not the law, right? The main case on this is Absalom. The commission doesn't even cite Absalom. It just says hogwash about how the Pope said you could get it, so it's okay. Just terrible stuff, right? Clearly written by somebody who's not legally trained. And now what are you stuck with? You have to go to the courts to have that judicially reviewed. Okay, that's $5,000 or $10,000 at least. Judicial review is very onerous. Okay, it's a specialized area of law. A lot of people don't even do it. The timelines and all the requirements, it's ridiculous. I do a lot of judicial review, so I'm speaking from experience. Okay, so then if you win your judicial review, which you're not necessarily likely to, because the judges like to defer to what these non-legally trained decision makers decide. Okay, even if you do win, now you're just back at stage one. So you wasted all that time, you wasted all those thousands of dollars just to get back at the commission to be going through with your rights as you should have. Okay, now would that have happened if you're one of the favored groups? I don't think so. Okay. And now look, I know this is a hard thing to hear. It's a hard thing for me to say. I've worked at the commissions. I've as on the inside as a staff member. I've litigated at the commissions. I see it over and over again. I've mediated at the commissions. I get people who are high up in the commission. They come on and they mitigate it. Your case is worth nothing. It's one of those stupid unvaccinated cases. Your case is worth nothing. You're going to lose. This is what they tell me and my clients. Okay, I'm in there with a Christian person who didn't take the shot, got fired for not taking the shot. They got Christian beliefs that say they can't take the shot, and these mediators are telling me, well, the Pope says it can take it, and I'm like, have you not read Absalom, the Supreme Court of Canada case on this? Oh well, I might have, and they're telling me the case is worth nothing. The bias is palpable. Okay, if I was to take my client who's some favored oppressed group in there, it would not be like that. It's not like that, and that's not okay. So access to justice should not be, but that's how it is in the Marxist worldview. Access to justice is predicated on your oppressor points, right? Based on these, what's your skin color and what are your genitals and what's your identity and blah 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 blah. What's your race? It shouldn't be that way, okay? In a world that's actually free and equal, but it is in the Marxist world, and because all these institutions are so Marxist now, that's how it works. You get more access to justice if you're one of these supposedly oppressed groups than if you're just a regular person who had your rights violated, right? That's not okay. And I know it's difficult and controversial to talk about. I'm sure a lot of people are upset that I say these types of things, but it's not okay. I care about humans. I don't care what your genitals are. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what you identify as. Okay. Well, I mean, maybe I do if it's causing harm to other people, like actual harm. Okay. But I care about the fact that you're a human being, and every human being is endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. And yes, I did just use American language on purpose. I think it's more accurate. That's what I care about as a person and as a lawyer, right? And you should not be privileged because of your skin color. Okay, and I don't care. And I don't care about yes. Okay, so whites enslaved blacks, and Arabs enslaved blacks, and blacks enslaved other blacks. I don't care about any of that in the past. Okay, I care about where are you at now. You're a human being. You have individual dignity and worth, and you should have equal rights under the law because that's the only proper way to do this. And all these other factors shouldn't matter. Okay, you shouldn't have more leniency or more access or whatever based on these things. And that's what I see as a real problem with the institutions in Canada, right? And so almost all my clients are Christian and unvaccinated. Why? They are you know they are the most, I'll use, abused in society, right? They're the ones losing their jobs, right? They're the ones who got kicked out of school. They're the ones who get kicked off the school boards. The moment they say I won't take the shot or I won't use your pronouns, right? So, sorry, I went on at length, but that's my problem because I care a lot about equality. I actually do because I think freedom and equality go together, and I think you don't get one
Yeah.
without the other.
Well, like to be honest, I haven't thought about this as much as you have. Like I have not been fighting the same kind of fights that you've been fighting, and the same kind of clients you've been um, that you have. So for me, it just is it's quite surprising to be completely frank, and I think that it seems like there just isn't a good balance of Catholic Christian people on these school boards. So I could see totally why you're getting so aggravated that they need to take a position because it really is about having a balanced discussion early on when these policies are being made. Because it seems like it's very heavy on one end, and all you need to do is have a more a better debate early on, because it's not like one side is the Christian side is completely outrageous with their demands and their requests. It's like it's just been forgotten a little bit right now. But and so then it seems like all they're doing now is just fighting back through courts, I think.
So let's go to the name of your podcast, Dialogue
Yeah.
Over Division. So your typical, regular, everyday, conservative-minded person. That's how they view the world. Christian or not, I've met a Muslim or not. I've met plenty of Muslims and atheists and agnostics and Christians and all the whole Baha'i and all the whole gamut. Okay, your typical conservative believes in dialogue over division. We don't divide people up based on this Marxist nonsense and then have them all fight with each other to see who's more oppressed. That's not a good society. It's a terrible
Hmm.
society. Okay, in fact, what we should have is dialogue about difficult, controversial things so we can hash it out. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the conservatives, generally the basic conservatives worldview, right? And that's all my clients. That's what they are. They're like, I got no issue with what you believe or what you say. I just want you to tolerate what I have to say and believe, right? The leftists or socialists or Marxists or woke person's worldview is the opposite. It is, I am right, you are wrong. Anything you say is harmful and hurtful and unwelcoming and offensive and harmful and hurtful, and it needs to be silenced for the better of humanity. For the better of me, but for the better of humanity, it needs to be silenced because I know I am right. I am morally superior to you, and I am right. My opinion's good. Yours is disinformation, it's misinformation, it's harmful and hurtful, and it needs to be silenced. And that'll be a good thing. And yeah, I know free speech is kind of this maybe this good thing to help out things, but this is more important. And so we're going to kick you out. We're going to shut you up. We're going to get you out of here. And we're going to make sure we do what's good for what I say is good for everybody. And that means dividing everybody up into these groups and making sure that we privilege the right ones, the right amount, and making sure that we try to somehow heal all these historical oppressions of Native people or Black people or trans people or whatever. And if you don't like that, if you over here, you privileged white person, if you don't say that, you better shut up, right? That's the problem is they want censorship and division over dialogue. We want dialogue over division, right? And but you can't. It's really difficult to persuade these people of that. They have a different worldview. Their worldview says that they should do these things and that they're morally superior and that they're morally right in doing these things. And that's really hard to argue against,
Hmm.
right? Because now you're coming up against these deep-seated morals, not just mere ideas. You're coming up against the ideologies, right? So that's why even though it's patently obvious on the facts that men are men and women are women, that they can't switch from each other, and that it's just obviously wrong to have boys go into men's washrooms. You all this makes rational sense, but you can't have that rational dialogue with them because it's an ideology, it's a cult, it's a belief system, it's deep seated. It goes beyond mere ideas, right? And then we're not able to have the dialogue. They just use the law to censor and kick out, and then we're left trying to use the law to say no, we shouldn't be kicked out. We should be let back in. We should have freedom of expression. We should have freedom of religion. We should have actual equality under the law, and all this should stop. And we should learn to get along. That's just it, you know.
Yeah.
I can get along. I had to cross-examine some trans activist in one of my cases a couple weeks ago. I got along with the person in the
Yeah.
cross-examination. You know, I even said at one point, could do you think that you and me and the student in the university could sit down and hash out how to avoid you know hurting this transgender person? And the witness basically said, yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's probably a way we could have done that if we had just talked about it, right?
Yeah. Well, that was going back to my earlier question was there any survey or anything done? Like, let's have a discussion. Let's have a dialogue about this. And I'm just so surprised. Like, I'm incredibly open-minded. I feel like I know very little and I want to learn a lot all the time. And I just don't understand where people are coming from a different view. So I'm always open to learn more, but especially when you're making these difficult decisions and that are affecting other people, you would think that people would take 10 times more effort to ensure that everybody's issues and opinions are heard. And I just don't know how we got to this place in Canada. It's really actually quite sad. And I think the level of dialogue in Canada is just very sad.
I have some thoughts on that. and they're hard thoughts. But for what I saw all through COVID was a loss of personal compassion and moral clarity.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that as a person in an institution with some level of power, whether you're an HR person at a private corporation, you're in government, whatever, the fact that you could say to somebody, you are unclean and not allowed to be here and you're losing your job. I don't care what your reason is for not taking this. I don't care how much you tell me it's experimental. You are losing your job. And in the meantime, I'll treat you like crap while I do it. And I'll accuse you of being insubordinate and a grandma killer and faking your religious beliefs, all to not, or being a tinfoil hat wearing person or whatever. And then I'm going to kick you out, right? Imagine what's wrong with your soul. Imagine how soul sick you are, or how brainwashed you've become with fear that you can treat another human being that way. That's what I'm seeing. What's wrong with Canadian society? That when you
Yeah.
get into a position where you have a little bit of power over somebody else's life, you treat them like dirt. And so that's why I think our institutions are failing, our courts are failing. Yes, the charter's not very good. I have issues with that too. But everywhere I look, our institutions and our governments and our courts are failing. Why? Because institutions, governments, and courts are only as good as the people filling them. And I see a huge lack of moral clarity and moral courage. I see a lot of soul sickness and personal corruption where people can treat other people like dirt if it fits their political or ideological narrative. That's not okay. I don't care how much I think gay sex is a sin because I'm a Christian. That doesn't mean that I treat gay people terribly. It doesn't. Right? And I'm not going to, by the way. And I
Yeah.
never have, by the way. So that's the problem, is people are placing politics over other human beings, right? And this is why a proper view of humanity, I think, is important. Every other human being, okay, has inherent dignity and worth. They're made in the image of God, and you should treat them with that basic dignity, regardless of your political beliefs. Okay, I think a person who votes for Biden is probably pretty stupid, and I'm really annoyed that they're doing that, or Trudeau, whatever the example is. They're still a human being. They still have inherent worth and dignity and value. They still deserve equality under the law. They still deserve to be free. They deserve to be free to make what I think is a bad choice, which is to maybe smoke weed and have sex with 4 people and vote for Trudeau the next day. I might think it's a bad idea. It doesn't matter what I think. It's a free society, and I'm still going to treat them with dignity, and I'm going to let them live their lives. And that's the problem: is the left doesn't want to let us do that. The woke, the socialists, the Marxists, whatever. I just call them the left. They don't want to let us do that. That's the problem.
Well, it's funny. I didn't expect the conversation to go here at all. I thought we would be like talking about the rule of law, constitution. But very interesting because again, I haven't been in your demographic of clients, so very Christian. But I come also from a yoga, like born Catholic, Polish, so 99.9%. But then I turned to yoga, and I just feel that in Canada, what is missing is a belief and an understanding of ourselves, who we are, why we are here. And I think that, you have the client group that is Catholic and Christian, like you're saying, unvaccinated because they stood up for their morals. And what I find in Canada is people don't know who they are. They don't know why they're here. And so when somebody is giving them information, they take it. They're like, oh, yes, I have to be mad at this person because they like the easy answer. And it's very sad for me to say this too. And I've seen it like, there's people aren't good at standing up for themselves because I don't think they know what they want to stand up for in Canada. And who is your worst enemy? It's you. And so that's what I see in Canada too. So it's very interesting. It's not like those are your clients, but I see that too. It doesn't have to just be Catholic Christians, a belief, but just any belief. Having some morality that you're going to stick to, that you're going to say, no, that is not right. I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm going to stand up for others. And I think that's missing in Canada, and that's sad.
Well, yes, I think you're right. I mean, that's Canadians, right? We're nice, we're pushovers, we roll over way too easily. We
I'm
we
going to
go.
stop you though. I don't think we're nice because you said exactly that. I think we're actually the opposite. We pretend to be nice. We're passive aggressive. We hide
Yes.
behind this veneer. And it was Russell Brand, who I think is amazing. He said the States has the president that they're meant to have because it's broken, it's got dementia, everything is wrong. Look at our prime minister, Justin Trudeau. He's the perfect prime minister for Canada. It's a veneer. Let's pretend to be inclusive and diverse. And in Canada, really, we are the most ruthless to each other. You go to other places and they're not like that. They would never tell on you and diminish you and disparage you in the same way I've seen in Canada. So I think it it's highlights, and I think you started with it. The people who are in power right now are based on the people that are in Canada, and there you go. There's the example. The highest person in power in Canada or in the United States is a perfect example of the country, in my opinion.
No, I'm glad you called me on that. Because you basically said what I meant by that. The niceness in Canada is fake. It's inauthentic. It's non-genuine, right? It's this veneer. And then, but substantively underneath, there is a lack of compassion. There is a lack of friendliness. There is a lack of neighborliness. There is a lack of I actually don't care about you personally, but because you're another human being who has dignity just like I do, I'm going to treat you that way
Right.
with dignity, right? You spend some time in red states in the US, and what you encounter is not a fake niceness, but a genuine friendliness. People
Yeah.
talk to you and treat you as if you're another human being, right? They actually have conversations with you. They don't avoid eye contact with you. They interact with you as if you are other human beings like them, and you actually live as neighbors in a community, and so you should actually be friendly with each other, not this fake veneer of niceness. And so they actually treat each other a little better, at least in these red areas in the US, than in Canada, right? We have the fake niceness, but underneath we treat each other with cruelty. And that's what I've seen through COVID. I've seen it personally. I've seen it in my cases. That's what I've seen. That's what I've talked about this often, about the cultural sickness in Canada with people, because we've developed this culture where we don't talk about the real issues like politics and religion. We have all this fakeness, this fake niceness, and then we don't actually treat each other with the inherent dignity that we should. And then we get this mess in the law, and we get this area, we get these issues with some people having more access or more rights apparently than others, because we've set ourselves up to have that kind of system, right?
Yeah.
How can you have equality and freedom under the law if you don't actually view each other as having equal dignity to each other?
Yeah.
There's a lot of black people who don't think white people have equal dignity to them anymore because they've been brainwashed into this new BLM movement. How are we possibly gonna have dialogue over division or unity or peacefulness or whatever in our society if that's what we think? You
Yeah.
know?
Well, and it's been so much more difficult than I ever imagined it to be. And then what we have as well is we have people saying, well, you go fix it. James Kitchen, you fix it in the law. And it's like, well, no, that's not how everything is going to change. We have to start with ourselves too. And so it's been, like you said, it's turned into a big mess. So I don't want to leave it on that. Maybe just an
Yes.
educational point at the end is, I'm sure you've seen a lot of, and I hate the word misinformation, but misunderstanding about the charter. So maybe if you could give one thought of, okay, this is what people don't seem to understand with the charter, and I'd like to help clarify that. Kind of putting you on the spot.
The biggest thing people need to understand about the charter is section 1, right? Well, not so much now, but a lot of the question the last 3 is, how did we get here? How is this mess happening? And I mean specifically with the court rulings, right? Why are we always losing the COVID cases? Why are the courts not upholding our rights? Why do they seem to hate us? Why? These are the questions I get from my clients. I get them on,
Yep.
on podcasts. I get them all over the place. How did we get here? You have to understand that it was a fatal flaw to put section 1 in the charter. Section 1, for everybody who doesn't know, says in plain language, all the rights that we say here should be protected can be violated at any time by any politician, so long as a judge agrees it's a good idea. That's what it means in plain
Well,
language.
that's not what it says. So
That's
I
not what it
would,
says. Let me tell you what it says. What it says is, all the rights herein are protected, are guaranteed, unless they can be limited in a way that can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society, which sounds really nice. And if you don't know anything about history, you think that's great. I mean, what? I mean, what's really going to be? I mean, demonstrably justified as a limitation of free speech or freedom of religion in a free and democratic society. I mean, that's going to be really hard. If you're ignorant of history, you will think that. If you're not ignorant of history, you'd be like, I've seen this before. Rights that are not absolute will not last.
Hope.
Okay? It's like a bad battery. It isn't gonna last long. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, our charter has very little, if anything, left to it after only 45 years, and the biggest reason is because it had a self-destruct button that's been pushed over and over and over and over again. Okay? Which is section 1. Don't bother protecting rights at all if you're not going to make them absolute. In the United States, rights are absolute. They were made that way in the late 1700s. For 200 years later, they're still there. In Canada, they were made not absolute, and 40 years later, they don't mean anything. That's not a coincidence, right? If you set your rights up to fail because you set them up to be squeezed by people who want to do that, what are you going to get? That's just how it works, right? Now, I get that that's tough, that's depressing, people don't want to hear that. How do we fix that? I know that, but that's if I'm being honest, if I'm answering honestly, the thing that I think people need to understand is what's fundamentally wrong with the charter and why it's failed after only 40 years, because it was designed wrong from the beginning. Why do bridges fall down after 10 years? They're designed wrong from the beginning, right? They can hold their weight up for a little while and then they crumble under the weight of their own flaws, design flaws.
So, again, I didn't want to end it on a
Oh, I'm sorry.
note, but so this is where I've been asking the question for a while now, and you seem to, like, you answered it, but I'll challenge you. Do you think it's just Section 1, the charter, or is it lawyers that haven't brought up the best charter claims? Or is it citizens that haven't been more engaged? Or is it elected officials that haven't done their job to as well as they could? Or is it the judiciary that hasn't done their job? Or the mainstream media that has an obligation? So is it just the charter, or is it all of these players that make democracy, and not just a democracy, but a healthy and strong democracy?
It's all those things. But before it was those, it was the design flaw of putting in section 1 and saying these rights are not absolute, which allows all these things to wreak havoc easily. Those things can wreak havoc anyways, but they're able to do it much more easily through section 1. Those things wreak havoc in the United States, but it's much more difficult because they don't have that back door or front door of the rights being non-absolute. Okay, so I agree with you. It is all those things. If you look at the charter, we had about a 10 or 15-year period where we had really strong rights, maybe even a little more than before the charter, maybe in some areas. Okay, especially in sort of like the 7 to 12, like the criminal rights. As a criminal, which it's good if it's good. It's actually good if our criminals have rights. I won't get into that; it's too long to explain. But if you go pre-charter, right? Search and seizure, you could get away with just about anything, right? Post-charter, oh, now you can't. So privacy was got a little bit better in the 80s and 90s, right? You have to think of it broadly historically, right? So what we did is we said, okay, we're going to bring in the charter, and so long as our judges are good and they believe in rights and freedoms, it's going to be wonderful. Well, that's pretty naive. Really? How long is that going to last? Okay, that's the problem. All right, so yes, what happened is in the late 90s into the 2000s, the composition of our benches changed. We went from having the Majors and the Yakabuchis and the Dixons of the world, right, to having, Wagners of the world, right, which have nothing but contempt for individual rights and freedoms. Okay, so that's the problem, is if you set that document up so that when inevitably you get a bunch of different judges who take a low view of rights and a high view of big government intervention, they're going to be able to use that self-destruct button you've given them to remake the country in their image, which is exactly what the Wagners of the world have done. So is it their fault? Sure, but we were the ones who set it up so that they'd be able to do that.
Well, and then, I'll challenge you here, is I suspect many of the people watching right now don't know what you meant when you said Yakabuchis of the world versus the Wagners of the world. Okay. So I go back to the point of, in order for a democracy to be strong and healthy, citizens need to be involved. And we have been apathetic and we
Yes.
have been asleep at the wheel. And
Yes.
if we're not involved in that, this is the outcome too. So, like, I've been debating that question a lot is whose fault is it? And I think it's everyone's, those five that I listed, but I would put a little bit more blame on the mainstream media because not only is it their job to investigate and hold the government to account, really, that's like basically what they're there to do. They were almost doing the opposite. You know, politicians are going to get away with what they can get away with, of course. Judiciary too, like depending on their view. But then we had the mainstream media that just went, completely opposite from what it is their role it is supposed to be. And that's where I think, then people weren't informed in the end and all of the dominoes fell as a result. But I think if you want to get into the Yakabuchi Wagner a little bit, but I think you kind of explained it in the end. But these were two Supreme Court justices in Canada with very different views. But the other thing is, I was reading Ruth Gator Ginsburg's book not too long ago, and that's kind of the example in the United States is she was very much on the left leaning. And her closest friend on the Supreme Court in the
Yeah.
United States was Scalia. So the most right. And I think that's like, I think it's okay to have these views, but this is where you were going back to. This dialogue is gone. We can't have that dialogue anymore unless you're in my silo, unless you're in my tribe. And that's where we've lost the plot here in Canada. And even if Wagner has his thoughts about civil liberties versus big government, we have to have somebody to challenge them.
Well,
And
that's
even as
yeah,
citizens.
that's the trouble. Is everybody's too scared now, right? We have a
Yeah.
society where everybody's running scared. I got lawyers telling me they're scared of the law societies, right? I wish I could say what you say, Mr. Kitchen, but I'm scared of the law society or my firm that I work for, right?
Yeah.
I'm scared too, to be honest. But I can't let that fear stand in my way. I got to say what I think is true, what people need to hear, because that's what I've been called to do. That's why I was privileged and blessed enough to become a lawyer in the first place, right?
Yeah.
That's the trouble. But yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, my criminal law professor was a raging leftist. She was so bad she went from the NDP to the Green Party because even they weren't left wing enough for her. I think she was great. I got along with her. We had so much fun in class, right? And she
Yeah.
knew I was the most right wing person in the whole law school, right? And she knew she was a flaming leftist. No problem, because we're human
Yeah.
beings and we're having
Yeah.
dialogue. And
Yeah.
that's what we've lost, right? And the right wingers are still willing to do it most of the time. Obviously, some of them aren't. Some of them are jerks. I get it. The problem is that the vast majority of the left wingers have lost that. Their idea is censorship, control, exclusion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't want to exclude them. I
Yeah.
don't want to punish them. I want to have a dialogue with them. I wish we
Yeah,
could.
and then so the only thing I've thought that can help this discussion and elevate it is education. So I've been trying to help Canadians understand, like that's why I put together a civics course that helps Canadians understand, how Canada came to be. What is the charter? Although my class was very different than what you just how you how you described section 1. I was a little bit more positive about it. Then division of powers. Wow, what's such an important one when we don't understand what people are supposed to do on a municipal level versus provincial versus federal. And I think it's great now in Alberta, Danielle Smith is now challenging the federal government a lot. At least it's getting that discourse into the mainstream so that people start to understand it. We talked about the legal system a bit and then civic engagement. So I'm hoping that by elevating the discussion a little bit, just educating people, we can elevate the discussion because at this point, it's just like, I'm not interested in cat fights. I don't think that's helpful for anyone. And I see it on all sides and it's really sad, like I said. So hopefully that was a little bit, it had to be me to end it on a positive note because
I'm
every
sorry.
time I turn it to you, James, it's like doomsday.
Yep, that's me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know.
Anything positive you want to say? I'm going to turn it off if you start talking negative.
Okay. Here's my positive thing.
Yay.
Don't don't self-censor. Express yourself, okay? And encourage others to do it around you. You'll be a happier person, you have a better society, and you don't understand the power you have in your voice and the damage you do to yourself and everybody around you when you self-censor. Please don't. Speak your mind. And if anything, be inspired by me. I mean, I've openly spoken my mind brutally today. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm just a regular guy just like you.
Yeah.
Speak your mind, don't self-censor, and good things will come from it, even if it's a little hard.
Great point. Because, like, look at the success it brought you. I don't know if you expected this. Like, I've just been speaking my mind, and then people seem to appreciate that. So, there you go. I think that's a great thought and advice to give people. So, thanks, James, very much. We're going to be back for a few more minutes with you, and I have a little bit more to ask you. That
Okay.
might get a little bit more exciting. We'll see. So, thanks again.